My name is Lorraine Mitchell, and I raised my son Marcus in a one-bedroom apartment in South Chicago, where the radiator only worked half the time and the walls were so thin I could hear Mrs. Patterson next door praying every single night. I worked 3 jobs to make sure Marcus never went to bed hungry. I cleaned offices at night, worked the register at Save Mart during the day, and did hair in my kitchen on weekends. My hands were always dry and cracked from the cleaning chemicals, but I never let Marcus see me cry about it. When Marcus got his acceptance letter to Northwestern University, I screamed so loud that Mrs. Patterson came running over thinking something was wrong. But nothing was wrong. Everything was finally right. My baby was going to college. My baby was going to have opportunities I never had. I never finished high school myself, got pregnant with Marcus when I was 17, and his daddy disappeared faster than snow in July. My own mama told me I was throwing my life away and kicked me out. So it was just me and Marcus against the world from day one. But I made sure Marcus had everything he needed, every book he wanted, every school trip he needed money for. I showed up to every parent-teacher conference, every basketball game, every awards ceremony. I was there, always. Marcus graduated from Northwestern with honors and got himself a fancy job at some big consulting firm downtown. Started making more money in a year than I'd made in my entire life. He bought me a nice 2-bedroom condo in a safe neighborhood, and I cried for 3 days straight when he gave me the keys. "Mama," he said, holding my hands, "you gave me everything. Now it's my turn to take care of you." That was my Marcus, my sweet, thoughtful boy. Then he met Vanessa. Vanessa Hartwell came from money, old money, the kind of black family that had been wealthy for generations, owned businesses, went to Martha's Vineyard every summer, and talked about their lineage like they were royalty. Her father, Richard Hartwell, owned Hartwell Industries, some big manufacturing company. Her mother, Patricia, had never worked a day in her life and looked down her nose at anyone who had. The first time Marcus brought Vanessa to meet me, I tried my best. I cooked a big dinner, cleaned my condo until it sparkled, and put on my nicest church dress. But from the moment Vanessa walked through my door, I could see it in her eyes. Disappointment, judgment. She barely touched her food. She kept checking her phone, and when I asked her about her family, she gave me short, polite answers that made it clear she didn't want to have a real conversation with me. After they left, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she was just nervous. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But over the next 2 years, as Marcus and Vanessa's relationship got more serious, I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa was pulling my son away from me. He came to visit less and less. Our weekly Sunday dinners became monthly, then every few months. When I called, he was always busy with something Vanessa's family had planned. When Marcus proposed to Vanessa, he called me on the phone instead of telling me in person. That hurt, but I swallowed my feelings and told him I was happy for him. "Mama, I want you to help with the wedding planning," he said. "You're important to me." But when I showed up to the first planning meeting at the Hartwell's massive house in Oak Park, Patricia Hartwell made it clear I wasn't welcome. "Oh, Lorraine," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "How nice of you to come, but really, Vanessa and I have everything under control." We've hired the best wedding planner in the city. You just relax and show up on the day, dear." I felt about 2 inches tall standing in her marble foyer, but I kept my head high. "I'd still like to be involved," I said. "Marcus is my only child." Patricia smiled that cold smile of hers. "Of course. We'll let you know if we need anything." They never called. 6 months later, the wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Heavy cardstock with gold embossing. It looked like something from a magazine, but when I opened it, my heart sank. The ceremony was on a Thursday afternoon. I'd already requested that Saturday off work months ago when Marcus first told me the date, but now they'd changed it without telling me. I called Marcus immediately. "Baby, the invitation says Thursday. I thought we agreed on Saturday." There was a long pause. "Mama, Vanessa's family really wanted Thursday. It worked better with their venue availability." "But Marcus, I can't get off work on a Thursday. I already used my vacation days. If I miss work, I could lose my job. Mama, please. This is my wedding. Can't you just call in sick or something?" My heart cracked a little. "Marcus, you know I can't do that. I need this job. Just figure it out, Mama, please." "This is important to me." He hung up before I could say anything else. I ended up quitting my job at Save Mart. After 12 years, I couldn't risk missing Marcus's wedding, even if it meant being unemployed, even if it meant struggling to pay my bills. He was my son. I'd figure it out somehow. The day of the wedding arrived. I'd saved up and bought myself a beautiful emerald green dress from Macy's. I got my hair done at my friend Keisha's salon. I wanted to look my best for my son's big day, even if I was terrified about what would happen after I ran out of savings. The wedding was at some fancy country club on the North Shore that I'd never even heard of. When I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, valets in white jackets gave me looks like I'd driven up in a garbage truck. But I held my head high and walked into that country club like I belonged there. The ceremony was beautiful. Marcus looked so handsome in his tuxedo. When he said his vows, his voice cracked with emotion, and I had to dab my eyes with a tissue. My baby was getting married, but during the whole ceremony, I noticed Vanessa's family whispering and glancing back at me. Patricia kept turning around with this pinched expression on her face. I tried to ignore it and focus on Marcus. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception hall. It was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere. A string quartet playing in the corner. This wedding probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. I walked around looking for my table assignment. The seating chart was on a big gold easel near the entrance. I scanned the names and finally found mine. Table 18. I frowned. Table 18 was in the very back corner of the room, practically in the hallway. I could barely see the head table from there, but I didn't make a fuss. I just headed to my table. When I got there, I saw the nameplates. Beautiful cream cardstock with gold calligraphy. And then I saw mine. It didn't say Lorraine Mitchell. It didn't even say Mother of the Groom. It said, Low-educated fake mum. I stood there staring at those words, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. My hands started shaking. I looked around to see if this was some kind of mistake, if maybe this was meant for someone else. But no, it was at the seat with my name on the seating chart. Before I could process what was happening, I heard laughter. I looked up and saw several members of Vanessa's family standing nearby, pointing at my nameplate and whispering to each other. Patricia Hartwell was there, covering her mouth with her hand. Like she was trying not to laugh, Vanessa's aunt, a thin woman with a sharp face, walked over. "Oh, Maya," she said loudly, not even trying to be subtle. "Who made this nameplate? How embarrassing." But she was smiling. They were all smiling. "I mean," Patricia added, her voice carrying across the room, "it's not exactly inaccurate, though, is it? She never even finished high school, and she's not really his mother. Not in any way that matters. Real mothers support their children's unions. They don't try to hold them back." Something in me broke. All those years of sacrifice. All those nights I went hungry so Marcus could eat. All those times I worked until my feet bled so he could have school supplies. All of it reduced to those 4 words on a nameplate. But I didn't cry. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I picked up the nameplate and held it in my hands, staring at it. That's when Marcus saw it. He'd been talking to some of his groomsmen near the bar, but something made him turn around. Maybe he sensed something was wrong. Maybe someone told him. But he came walking over, and when he saw that nameplate in my hands and the look on my face, everything changed. "Mama," he said, his voice uncertain. "What's wrong?" I held up the nameplate. "Someone made this for me." Marcus's face went from confusion to horror in about 2 seconds. He snatched the nameplate from my hands and read it. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Patricia Hartwell laughed nervously. "Oh, Marcus, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." "A joke?" Marcus turned to look at her. "You think insulting my mother is a joke?" "Darling, calm down," Vanessa said, hurrying over in her white dress. "It's not that serious. It's just a silly prank." "It's not serious?" Marcus looked at his bride like he'd never seen her before. "Vanessa, do you think this is funny?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything I needed to see. "I mean," Vanessa said slowly, "obviously it's not the best taste, but we shouldn't let it ruin the whole day. People worked hard on this wedding." "People worked hard?" Marcus repeated. "My mother worked 3 jobs her entire life to raise me. She gave up everything for me. She quit her job so she could be here today. And you think it's okay for your family to disrespect her like this?" The reception hall had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Richard Hartwell stepped forward. "Son, let's not blow this out of proportion. Why don't you and I go talk?" "I'm not your son," Marcus cut him off. His voice was shaking with anger. "And I'm not blowing anything out of proportion. You people have treated my mother like she's nothing from day one. I overlooked it because I loved Vanessa. But this?" He held up the nameplate. "This is too far." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Marcus, please. Think about what you're doing. This is our wedding day. All our friends and family are here." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Then he looked at me. I saw my baby making a choice. And then Marcus did something that made my heart stop and soar at the same time. He took off his boutonniere and placed it on the table. Then he walked over to me, took my hand, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Dad, let's go home." Dad. He called me Dad because I was his father and his mother. I was everything. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Vanessa's face went pale. Patricia Hartwell looked like she might faint. "Marcus," Vanessa cried out, "you can't just leave. This is our wedding." But Marcus was already walking me toward the exit, his hand firmly holding mine. "Stop him!" Richard Hartwell shouted. "Someone stop him!" But nobody moved. We walked straight out of that country club, past all those shocked faces, past the expensive decorations and the string quartet and the 5-tier wedding cake. We walked out into the parking lot where the sun was just starting to set, and Marcus pulled me into the tightest hug I'd had in years. "I'm so sorry, Mama," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have seen what they were doing." I was crying now, really crying, all the tears I'd been holding back for months. "It's okay, baby," I said. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay, not yet, because we both knew this wasn't over. The Hartwells weren't the type of family to just let this go. And Vanessa would be furious. We sat in Marcus's car in that parking lot, neither of us knowing what came next. "Where do we go from here?" Marcus asked. I took a deep breath. "Home," I said. "We go home." What neither of us knew was that the next morning, the Hartwells would get a wake-up call that would change everything. Because there was something I'd never told Marcus. Something I'd kept hidden for 28 years. Something that would make the Hartwells wish they'd never written those words on that nameplate. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. We drove back to my condo in silence. Marcus kept glancing over at me like he was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. When we pulled into my parking space, he turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. "Mama," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it, baby?" "I knew Vanessa's family looked down on you. I knew it, and I let it happen. I told myself it would get better after the wedding. I told myself they'd come around eventually." His voice cracked. "I was a coward. I chose her over you. And I'm sorry." I reached over and took his hand. "Marcus, you're not a coward. You're human. You fell in love. That's what you're supposed to do." "But I should have defended you. All those times her mama made those little comments about your education, about your job, about where you lived. I should have said something." "You said something tonight," I told him. "When it really mattered, you chose right. That's all I needed to see." We went upstairs and I made us some tea. Marcus sat at my kitchen table, still wearing his tuxedo, looking lost. His phone kept buzzing. Vanessa, her parents, his groomsmen. He ignored all of them. "What am I going to do, Mama?" he asked. "I just walked out on my own wedding. Vanessa's going to hate me. Her family probably wants to kill me." I sat down across from him. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He looked up at me, confused. I took a deep breath. This was the secret I'd carried for 28 years. The secret I'd kept even from my own son. "When you were 6 years old," I began, "I was working as a night cleaner at this big office building downtown. One night, I was cleaning the executive floor, and I found a woman passed out in her office. She'd had a heart attack." Marcus leaned forward, listening. "I called 911, stayed with her, did CPR like I'd learned at the community center. The paramedics said I saved her life." I paused. "That woman was Eleanor Chen. She owned Chen Venture Capital, one of the biggest investment firms in Chicago. Okay, Marcus said slowly, not understanding where this was going. Eleanor wanted to thank me. She tried to give me money, but I refused. I told her I didn't save her life for a reward. So instead, she offered me something else. She said she saw something in me. Intelligence, drive. She offered to mentor me. I got up and walked to my bedroom. I came back with a folder I had kept hidden in the back of my closet for years. Inside were documents, certificates, letters. For the next 15 years, Eleanor taught me everything she knew about business and investing. She paid for me to get my GED, then my business degree through night classes at Harold Washington College. She taught me how to read financial statements, how to evaluate companies, how to spot opportunities. Marcus's eyes were wide now. Mama, what are you saying? I'm saying that while I was working those 3 jobs, I was also learning. And Eleanor started giving me small amounts of money to invest. $500 here, $1,000 there. She taught me how to turn money into more money. I pulled out one document in particular. And 20 years ago, Eleanor helped me invest in a small manufacturing company that was struggling. We bought 30% of the shares for almost nothing because nobody else wanted them. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Marcus took the document from my hands. His face went pale as he read it. Mama, he whispered, this is Hartwell Industries. Yes, I said. Richard Hartwell was desperate for money to save his father's company. He sold off chunks of it to anyone who would buy. Eleanor and I bought in through a shell company. He has no idea who the real owners are. Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You own 30% of Vanessa's family company? Eleanor owns 15%. I own 15%. We're the second largest shareholders after the Hartwell family. I sat back down. Richard thinks he's dealing with some anonymous Chinese investment firm. He has no idea it's been me all along. But Mama, that company is worth... Marcus pulled out his phone and started searching. Hartwell Industries is worth $47 million. 15% of that is about $7 million, I finished. Yes. Marcus looked like he might pass out. You're a millionaire? On paper, I said, but I never touched that money, Marcus. I kept working. I kept living simply, because that money wasn't for me. It was for you. I wanted you to build your own life, earn your own success. I didn't want to hand you everything. I wanted you to know you could achieve things on your own. Does Eleanor Chen know about tonight? About what happened at the wedding? I smiled slightly. I called her from the parking lot while you were taking off your tie. And she's making some calls. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He looked at me and I nodded. He answered. Hello? I could hear a man's voice on the other end, frantic. Marcus put it on speaker. Marcus, this is Richard Hartwell. Where are you? We need to talk, right now. I don't think we have anything to talk about, Richard, Marcus said coldly. Please, just listen. Something's happened. We got a call this morning from our investors. The anonymous Chinese firm that owns 30% of our company. They're calling an emergency shareholders meeting. They're threatening to vote out the entire board. They could take control of the whole company. Marcus looked at me. I kept my face neutral. That sounds like a problem for you to handle, Marcus said. I'm no longer marrying into your family, so it's not my concern. Marcus, please. I know we made a mistake last night. That nameplate was inappropriate. We apologize, but this is serious. If we lose control of the company, hundreds of people will lose their jobs. The company my father built will be destroyed. You should have thought about that before you insulted my mother. We'll make it right. Whatever you want. Just please talk to Vanessa. Come back. We can fix this. Marcus looked at me again. I shook my head slightly. No, Marcus said simply, and hung up. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. Eleanor Chen. Lorraine, she said warmly. How are you holding up, dear? I'm okay, Eleanor. Thank you for moving so quickly. Of course. When you told me what they did to you at that wedding, I was furious. The disrespect, the cruelty, after everything you've overcome. She paused. I've scheduled the shareholders' meeting for Monday morning. That gives them the weekend to panic. What's your plan? I asked. We're going to restructure the entire company, vote out Richard Hartwell as CEO, install new leadership. We've been too hands-off for too long, Lorraine. It's time we took an active role. Marcus was listening to all of this with his mouth hanging open. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. I did some digging into the Hartwell's finances. They're not as wealthy as they pretend to be. Most of their personal money is tied up in the company stock. If they lose control of Hartwell Industries, they lose everything. After I hung up, Marcus just stared at me. Who are you? He asked, but he was smiling. I thought I knew you, but you're like a completely different person. I'm the same person, baby. I'm still your mama who worked 3 jobs and made you macaroni and cheese on Wednesdays. I just have some skills that I kept quiet about. Why didn't you ever tell me? I reached across the table and held his hand, because I didn't want you to grow up thinking money was what mattered. I wanted you to know the value of hard work. I wanted you to be humble and kind and grateful. If you'd known I was wealthy, it might have changed you, and I liked who you were becoming. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You walked away from your own wedding for me. You called me Dad. You showed me that all those years of sacrifice paid off. You turned out good, Marcus, real good. We spent the rest of Friday and all day Saturday together, just like old times. We watched movies. I cooked his favorite foods. He told me everything about how his relationship with Vanessa had slowly changed him. How he'd started to feel like he had to be someone different around her family. They made me feel like where I came from was something to be ashamed of, he said, like you were something to be ashamed of. And I started to believe it. That's the worst part. I started to see you through their eyes instead of my own. But you found your way back, I said. That's what matters. On Sunday morning, Marcus's phone started blowing up. Vanessa, her mother, her father, her aunts and uncles, all of them begging him to come back, to fix things, to make the investors happy. Vanessa left a voicemail that Marcus played on speaker. Marcus, I don't know what's happening with our company, but my father says it's serious. He says we could lose everything. If you ever loved me, please help us. Talk to whoever you need to talk to. My family's entire legacy is at stake. She paused. And I'm sorry. About the nameplate. About how we treated your mother. It was wrong. I see that now. Please, just give us a chance to make it right. Marcus deleted the voicemail. Too little, too late, he muttered. Monday morning came. Eleanor picked me up in her town car. She was 73 years old now, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my car. But her eyes were still sharp and kind. Ready to shake up some boardrooms? She asked with a smile. I've been ready for 20 years, I replied. Marcus came with us. He wanted to see this. We drove to the Hartwell Industries headquarters, a gleaming glass building in the business district. When we walked into the lobby, the receptionist's eyes went wide. Miss Chen, we weren't expecting you to come in person. I wouldn't miss this for the world, Eleanor said smoothly. We took the elevator to the top floor where the boardroom was. Through the glass walls, I could see the Hartwell family already seated. Richard, Patricia, Vanessa, several other board members who were probably family friends or people Richard had appointed. They looked nervous, scared even. We walked in, and the room went silent. Richard Hartwell stood up. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding. Then he saw me walking in behind Eleanor. His face went from nervous to confused. What is she doing here? Patricia asked, standing up. This is a private shareholders meeting. Eleanor smiled. She's here because she's a shareholder. Allow me to introduce my business partner and co-investor, Lorraine Mitchell. You could have heard a pin drop. Vanessa's mouth fell open. That's not possible. I assure you, it's very possible, Eleanor said, pulling out documents. Ms. Mitchell and I have owned 30% of this company for 20 years. And we've been very patient, very hands-off investors. But recent events have made us question the current leadership's judgment and character. Richard's face had gone from pale to red. This is absurd. You can't just... We can, Eleanor interrupted. And we will. As of this meeting, we are calling for a vote of no confidence in Richard Hartwell as CEO. You can't do that, Patricia shrieked. This is our family's company. Actually, I said, speaking for the first time and enjoying the look on their faces, you only own 45%. Eleanor and I own 30%. The remaining 25% is split among various smaller investors, several of whom Eleanor has been in contact with over the weekend. They're not happy with how you've been running things. Marcus stood beside me, watching his former in-laws fall apart. One of the other board members, an older black man named Mr. Washington, who I knew from the files Eleanor had shown me, cleared his throat. I'd like to hear more about these concerns regarding leadership. Eleanor pulled out a folder. Over the past 5 years, Hartwell Industries has seen declining profits despite a booming economy. Multiple contracts have been lost due to poor management decisions. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time low. And just this weekend, we learned that the CEO and his family engaged in publicly humiliating a guest at a family event, showing a serious lack of judgment and character. That has nothing to do with business, Richard protested. It has everything to do with business, Eleanor countered. Character matters. How you treat people matters. And how you treated Ms. Mitchell, a woman who overcame incredible odds to become a successful investor, shows exactly what kind of people you are. Vanessa suddenly stood up. Wait, you're an investor? But Marcus said you were just a cleaning lady. I looked at her calmly. I was a cleaning lady. I also worked retail and did hair, and while I was doing all of that, I was studying business and learning how to invest. I built myself up from nothing, something you've never had to do. But the nameplate, Patricia said weakly, it said low educated. I have a bachelor's degree in business from Harold Washington College, I said. I earned it while working full-time and raising a child alone. What degrees do you have, Patricia? She didn't answer. The vote was called. With Eleanor's and my 30%, plus the votes from 3 other board members who were tired of the Hartwell's mismanagement, Richard Hartwell was removed as CEO. Eleanor was installed as interim CEO until a permanent replacement could be found. The Hartwells sat in stunned silence. "This isn't over," Richard finally said, his voice shaking with rage. "We'll sue. We'll fight this." "Go ahead," Eleanor said calmly. "We have lawyers who would love nothing more than to bury you in litigation for the next decade. But I'll offer you a deal. You can stay on as minority shareholders and collect your dividends, or you can try to fight us and lose everything. Your choice." We walked out of that boardroom with our heads held high. In the elevator going down, Marcus hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Mama, that was incredible," he said. "Did you see their faces?" Eleanor laughed. "I've been waiting 20 years to see Richard Hartwell taken down a peg. That man's arrogance was always his weakness." When we got back to Eleanor's car, she turned to me. "So what now, Lorraine? You've got $7 million in company stock. You could retire, travel, buy a house on the beach." I thought about it. Maybe I will buy a little house, something with a garden, but mostly I want to do what you did for me. I want to help other women who are struggling. Single mothers working multiple jobs, women who think they're stuck. I want to show them there's another way. Eleanor smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea, and I'd like to help." Marcus drove me home that evening. We were both exhausted, but in a good way. Like we'd won a battle we'd been fighting for years without even knowing it. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Marcus said as we pulled up to my building. "Anything, baby. Do you think I should try to work things out with Vanessa? I mean, she apologized. Maybe her family will be different now." I turned to look at him. "Marcus, do you love her?" He was quiet for a long time. "I thought I did, but I think I loved the idea of her more than who she actually was. I loved feeling like I'd made it, like I'd arrived at some level of success that proved I wasn't just the kid from the South Side anymore. "You don't need Vanessa or her family to prove your success," I said. "You're successful because of who you are, because you're smart and hardworking and kind, not because of who you're married to." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I know you're right." "Give yourself time," I told him. "Don't make any big decisions right now. Just breathe." That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, I'd been a cleaning lady and a retail worker who'd quit her job to attend her son's wedding. Now I was a millionaire who'd just helped take down one of Chicago's prominent families. Life was funny sometimes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't quite finished. The Hartwells weren't the type of people to just accept defeat. They were wounded and angry and humiliated. And wounded, angry, humiliated people were dangerous. I didn't have to wait long to find out just how dangerous. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, a man in a suit handed me an envelope. "Lorraine Mitchell?" You've been served. I took the envelope and opened it. The Hartwells were suing me for fraud, claiming I'd somehow illegally obtained my shares in their company. They were also suing Marcus for breach of contract, claiming he'd agreed to certain prenuptial terms that he'd violated by walking out on the wedding, and they were going public with their story, painting me as some kind of con artist who'd seduced Eleanor Chen into helping me steal their family company. By noon, the story was all over the news. Local cleaning lady scams her way into millions. Poor single mother accused of corporate espionage. The headlines were brutal. My phone was ringing off the hook. Reporters wanting comments, old co-workers asking if it was true. Even Mrs. Patterson from my old apartment called asking if I needed prayer. Marcus showed up at my door looking panicked. "Mama, have you seen the news? They're destroying your reputation. They're making you look like a criminal." I sat down on my couch, feeling suddenly very tired. "I know, baby. What are we going to do?" I looked at the legal papers in my hand. Then I looked at my son's worried face, and I smiled. "We're going to fight," I said. "They want a war? Let's give them one they'll never forget." Because the Hartwells had just made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me once again, and this time I was going to make sure they understood exactly who they were dealing with. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life, and that's saying something considering I'd raised a child alone while working 3 jobs. The Hartwells had money and connections, and they used both to try to destroy me. Every day there was a new article, a new accusation. They dug up old records from when I'd filed for public assistance when Marcus was a baby. They found people who'd worked with me years ago and convinced them to say I'd always been scheming and calculating. They painted me as a gold digger who'd somehow manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman into helping me steal their company. Never mind that Eleanor Chen was one of the sharpest business minds in Chicago and about as vulnerable as a shark. I lost the hair clients I'd built up over the years. People crossed the street to avoid me. Even some of the folks at my church started giving me strange looks. But some people stood by me. Mrs. Patterson, my old neighbor, called me every single day. "Don't you let those rich folks break you, Lorraine. I've known you since Marcus was in diapers. You're good people." My friend Keisha closed her salon for a whole afternoon to come sit with me when the news trucks showed up outside my building. "Let them talk," she said, holding my hand. "The truth always comes out eventually." And Eleanor Chen was a rock. She held a press conference and told the world exactly how we'd become business partners, how I'd saved her life, and then proven myself to be brilliant with investments. "Lorraine Mitchell is one of the most honorable people I've ever met," Eleanor said, looking directly into the cameras. "The Hartwells are simply embarrassed that a woman they looked down on turned out to be smarter than all of them combined." But the best support came from Marcus. He moved back into my condo temporarily, sleeping on my couch even though he had his own nice apartment downtown. He answered my phone when reporters called. He went to the grocery store for me when I couldn't face the stairs. He reminded me who I was when I started to forget. "Mama, you raised me to stand up for what's right," he said one night after a particularly brutal news segment. "You taught me that character is what you do when nobody's watching." You have more character in your pinky finger than that whole family has in their entire bloodline. 2 weeks after being served, we had our first court date. Eleanor had hired the best lawyers in Chicago. Our lead attorney was a sharp black woman named Simone Jefferson, who reminded me of a younger version of Eleanor. All business, no nonsense, and scary smart. They have no case, Simone told us in her downtown office the day before court. Everything you did was legal. You bought stock in a struggling company through legitimate means. The fact that you didn't advertise your identity as a shareholder isn't illegal. It's actually standard practice. Rich people do it all the time. Then why are we even going to court? Marcus asked. Because they're hoping to intimidate your mother into settling. They want her to sell back her shares for pennies on the dollar and disappear quietly. They're banking on her not having the resources or the will to fight. Simone smiled, but they didn't count on Eleanor Chen's checkbook or my stubbornness. The courthouse was packed the next morning. News cameras everywhere. The Hartwells arrived in matching designer suits, looking like they were going to a country club instead of a legal proceeding. Richard had his jaw set in that arrogant way rich men do when they think money makes them right. Vanessa was there too. She looked miserable. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw something in her face. Regret, maybe? Or just fear that her family's empire was crumbling. I couldn't tell, and honestly didn't care anymore. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom. The Hartwell's lawyer, a white man with silver hair and an expensive suit, stood up first. Your Honor, this is a clear case of fraud and manipulation. Ms. Mitchell, a woman with no education and no business background, somehow convinced Eleanor Chen, a woman who was recovering from a traumatic medical event and therefore vulnerable, to help her illegally acquire shares in my client's family business. Simone stood up immediately. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making statements not supported by evidence. Ms. Chen was examined by multiple doctors and found to be of completely sound mind when she made her investment decisions. And Ms. Mitchell has a bachelor's degree in business, which hardly qualifies as no education. The judge, a black woman in her 60s named Judge Anderson, looked over her glasses at the Hartwell's lawyer. Sustained. Stick to facts, counselor, not opinions. The trial went on for 3 days. The Hartwells brought in financial experts who tried to argue that the stock purchase was somehow irregular. Simone brought in our own experts who showed that everything was done by the book. But the real turning point came on the 3rd day when Simone called Eleanor Chen to the stand. Eleanor walked up there like she owned the place. At 73, she had more presence than people half her age. Ms. Chen, Simone began, can you tell us about the night you met Lorraine Mitchell? Eleanor turned to face the jury. I was having a heart attack in my office. I'd been working late, and I felt this crushing pain in my chest. I collapsed. If Lorraine hadn't found me when she did, I would have died. She saved my life. And after that, how did your relationship with Ms. Mitchell develop? I wanted to thank her, of course. I tried to give her money, but she refused. She said she didn't save my life for a reward. She did it because it was the right thing to do. Eleanor smiled. That's when I knew she was special. In my business, everyone wants something, but Lorraine didn't. She just wanted to take care of her son and make an honest living. So how did you become business partners? I saw potential in her, intelligence, drive, street smarts that you can't learn in any Ivy League school. So I offered to mentor her. Over the next 15 years, I taught her everything I knew about business and investing. And let me tell you, she was one of the best students I ever had. The Hartwell's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. Ms. Chen, isn't it true that you were vulnerable after your heart attack? That you were on medication that could have affected your judgment? Eleanor looked at him like he was a bug. I was on blood thinners, counselor, not hallucinogens. My mind was perfectly clear. Clear enough to build my company from nothing, and clear enough to recognize talent when I saw it. But why would you invest with a cleaning lady instead of professional investors? Because professional investors think they know everything. Lorraine was humble enough to learn, and she was motivated. She had a son to provide for. That kind of motivation is worth more than any MBA. When Eleanor stepped down, I saw several jury members nodding. Then Simone called me to the stand. I was terrified. Public speaking had never been my thing. But I thought about Marcus sitting in that courtroom, and I found my courage. Simone walked me through my whole story. Growing up poor, getting pregnant at 17, being kicked out by my own mother, raising Marcus alone, working multiple jobs, finding Eleanor, learning about business while most people were sleeping. Why didn't you tell anyone about your investments? Simone asked. Because I didn't want it to change how people saw me, I said honestly. I didn't want Marcus growing up thinking money was what mattered. I wanted him to value hard work and kindness and integrity. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, that a girl from the South Side with a GED could be just as smart as people with fancy degrees. And the Hartwell Industries investment, why did you choose that company? Eleanor and I researched dozens of companies. Hartwell Industries was struggling, but it had good bones. We believed in its potential. We invested our money, and we helped turn it around. That's not fraud, that's business. Then came the hard part, the Hartwell's lawyer. Ms. Mitchell, isn't it true that you held a grudge against the Hartwell family? No, sir. I didn't even know them when I made the investment 20 years ago. But you knew your son was dating Vanessa Hartwell, and you didn't tell him about your investment. Why? Because my investment had nothing to do with their relationship. It wasn't relevant. Or maybe you were planning this all along. Maybe you saw an opportunity to infiltrate their family and destroy them from the inside. I looked him dead in the eye. Sir, I fell in love with my investment portfolio the same way you probably fell in love with billable hours, because it was good business. I didn't plan for my son to fall in love with Vanessa. That just happened. And honestly, if I'd known how her family would treat me, I would have tried to talk him out of it. Some people in the courtroom laughed. Even Judge Anderson cracked a smile. But you showed up at that wedding knowing you had power over their company. I showed up at that wedding as a mother who wanted to see her only child get married. Nothing more. My voice got stronger. And when they put that nameplate in front of me, low-educated fake mum, that's when I realized exactly what kind of people they were. People who judge others by their bank accounts instead of their character. The lawyer tried a few more times to trip me up, But I held firm. I told the truth. And the truth was simple. I'd done nothing wrong. On the fourth day, both sides gave closing arguments. The Hartwells' lawyer painted me as a schemer. Simone painted me as a survivor who'd earned everything she had. Then we waited while the jury deliberated. It only took them 3 hours. When we came back into the courtroom, my heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone could hear it. Marcus held my hand on one side. Eleanor held my hand on the other. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Anderson asked. "We have, Your Honor." "In the case of Hartwell vs. Mitchell, how do you find?" "We find in favor of the defendant, Lorraine Mitchell, on all counts." The courtroom erupted. Marcus hugged me so tight, he lifted me off the ground. Eleanor was crying, which I'd never seen her do before. Simone was grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Across the aisle, the Hartwells looked like they'd been hit by a truck. But Judge Anderson wasn't done. "Furthermore," she said, banging her gavel for order, "I'm ordering the Hartwell family to pay Miss Mitchell's legal fees and to issue a public apology for the defamatory statements made during this trial. And let me say something off the record." She looked directly at Richard Hartwell. "I've been a judge for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of wealthy people think they can buy their way out of accountability. What you did to Ms. Mitchell at that wedding was cruel and inexcusable. She earned every penny she has through intelligence, hard work, and courage. 3 things money can't buy. I hope you've learned something from this experience, though I doubt it." Court dismissed. We walked out of that courthouse into bright sunshine. The news cameras were there. But this time I didn't hide. I stood tall and answered their questions. "How do you feel about the verdict, Ms. Mitchell?" "I feel vindicated. I feel relieved. And I feel grateful for everyone who stood by me." "What message do you have for the Hartwell family?" I thought about that for a moment. "I hope they learn that respect isn't something you can buy. It's something you earn by how you treat people, all people, not just the ones you think are important." "What's next for you?" I smiled. "I'm going to do what I always planned. Help other women like me, single mothers, women working multiple jobs, women who think they're stuck. I'm starting a foundation to provide business education and microloans for women who want to start their own businesses or invest in their futures." That last question wasn't planned, but as soon as I said it, I knew it was right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The public apology from the Hartwells made national news. Richard Hartwell stood in front of cameras looking like he was swallowing glass and admitted they'd been wrong about me. Vanessa called Marcus one last time. I heard his side of the conversation. "I'm sorry too, Vanessa, but we both know it wouldn't have worked. We wanted different things. We were different people." He paused. "I hope you find someone who makes you happy. I really do. But it's not me." When he hung up, he looked lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. 6 months later, I bought a beautiful house in Hyde Park with a big garden. Not too fancy, but comfortable. Room for Marcus to visit. Room for the grandkids I hoped to have someday. Eleanor and I officially launched the Second Chances Foundation. We started with 10 women, giving them business education and seed money to start small businesses or invest. Within a year, we'd expanded to 50 women, then 100, Some of the women were former cleaning ladies like me. Some were waitresses, some were nursing assistants, some were hairstylists. All of them were brilliant and hardworking and just needed someone to believe in them. I got a call one day from one of our first participants, a woman named Tasha who'd been working at a call center. She'd used our loan to start a catering business. "Ms. Lorraine," she said, crying happy tears, "I just landed my first big contract. I'm catering a wedding for 200 people. I'm going to make more in one weekend than I used to make in 3 months." That feeling, knowing I'd helped someone change their life, was better than any revenge could ever be. Marcus started dating again, but this time he was more careful, more thoughtful. He brought home a woman named Jasmine, who was a teacher at a South Side elementary school. She was kind and funny and didn't care that Marcus's mother had millions of dollars. She cared that he volunteered at a youth center on weekends and called his mama every Sunday. I liked her immediately. "Mama," Marcus said one Sunday dinner at my new house, "I want to thank you." "For what, baby?" "For never giving up, for showing me what real strength looks like, for teaching me that where you come from doesn't define where you're going." He smiled. "And for walking out of that wedding with me. Best decision I ever made." I reached across the table and held his hand. Best decision we ever made. A year after the trial, I ran into Patricia Hartwell at a charity event. She looked older, smaller somehow. Her husband had stepped down from Hartwell Industries completely. Vanessa had moved to New York. Their family wasn't ruined, but they weren't the same either. She saw me and froze. I could have walked away, could have ignored her, could have made her feel as small as she'd tried to make me feel. But that's not who I was. I walked over to her. "Patricia," I said simply. "Lorraine." She couldn't meet my eyes. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the one my lawyer made me give." "Go ahead." She took a shaky breath. "I was wrong about you. I judged you without knowing you. I thought people like you couldn't possibly be on the same level as people like us. But I was the one who was low, not in education, in character." I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." "For what it's worth," she continued. "Losing our company, going through that trial, it changed us, changed me. I'm volunteering now at a women's shelter, trying to give back, trying to be better." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "We all deserve second chances." She finally met my eyes. "How do you do it? How did you forgive us?" I thought about that. I didn't forgive you for your sake. I forgave you for mine, because holding on to anger and resentment, that's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I had too much life left to live to waste it being bitter. Patricia nodded, tears in her eyes. "I hope someday I can be as strong as you." "You can," I told her. "Strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, one hard decision at a time." 2 years after that nameplate at the wedding, I was sitting in my garden on a warm summer evening. Marcus and Jasmine were getting married next month, a small ceremony at my church with just close friends and family. No nameplates, no drama, just love. Eleanor stopped by with a bottle of wine. "You know what I realized?" she said as we sat watching the sunset. "What's that?" "That night I had my heart attack. When you found me, you didn't just save my life. You changed it. You showed me what really matters, Not money, not power, but connection, purpose, helping others. You changed my life too, I said. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. That's what we do for each other, Eleanor said. We see each other's light, even when they can't see it themselves. We sat in comfortable silence, two women who'd come from different worlds but found something in common, the belief that everyone deserves dignity, respect, and a chance to prove what they're capable of. My phone buzzed, a text from one of our foundation women. Ms. Lorraine, I just bought my first house. Thank you for believing in me. I showed Eleanor the text, and we both smiled. You know what the best revenge is? I asked. What's that? Living well, building something beautiful, helping others. That's better than any takedown or courtroom victory. Eleanor raised her glass. To living well. To living well, I echoed. And as the sun set over my garden, I thought about that nameplate that had started everything. Low-educated fake mum. They'd meant it as an insult, as a way to make me feel small and worthless. But instead, it became the push I needed to stop hiding, to step into my power, to show the world and myself who I really was. I was Lorraine Mitchell. I was a mother, a businesswoman, an investor, a mentor, and a survivor. And I was proud of every single part of my story. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.